Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. I was going to do a video on humor or comedy or something like this. I said nah, because what would I say about it exactly? I don't know. I could give sort of my opinion or my views. And I saw today Charles Tew, T-E-W, has done a video on Q&A on objectivism and humor. A two-part video which comes to somewhere around 40 minutes with both installments. So now I have a grounding. You can go there and watch that, and I don't have to repeat what he says, that Ayn Rand says about objective or about humor, that it's laughing at the insignificant and so on. That gives us a grounding, and I can go and say what I can say as an objectivist who actually does stand up. So let me give you a little bit of background so you know where I'm coming from, and then I'll just tell you a little bit about my experiences with comedy. My background is doing these things called open mics, where anybody off the street can come and do their thing. And I started doing them in Salt Lake City, and there's a few comedy clubs. And I kept doing them when I came back east here to Connecticut. Now, the open mic is a bizarre structure. It's like, if you do really good at them, you can get a spot in a show. And if you do really good in your show, you can get bigger and bigger. And they say, what's your stage name? What should we call you by when we say, next is coming up, and they just ask what your stage name is. You don't have to give papers. You don't have to give identification. Now, you don't get paid, right? But it is a chance for fame. It's an audition for fame. Now, I didn't take it maybe as seriously as I should have, and I still don't. I just go and do the jokes I want to do the way I want to do them, and sometimes I get in fights with the audience, make fun of the audience, and that's not good. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. But this is a massive opportunity. It's one of the last places in our society that is totally unregulated. I think that's one of the reasons I found my way to it and that I like it, is because everybody that doesn't like what I do can just shut up. And I'll do my thing my way. And so let's talk a little bit about this scene. I do these things in these comedy things. I started out, let's talk about that, in Utah. These comedy things where it's 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes on stage. And you think that you could stand up there and tell jokes for 2 minutes, but some people can't. And it's particularly difficult if they're not laughing at your jokes. Then you just have to get on to the next joke. And your jokes don't take as long if they're not laughing. You get through them quicker. But just try to stand up there and do 2 minutes sometimes. And that's what I started out with. And some people had to bail before they got to the end of the 2 minutes. And I got to where I could fill up to 2 minutes. And then I would go back a couple weeks later and try my material again and think, oh man, this is great. Last time was great. And they don't laugh. And it's because they're the same audience. And so I found out I had to have new jokes every time I went on stage. I thought, this is going to be rough, because I've seen like Seinfeld. I've seen him do specials. I've seen these different comedians that do specials, and they appear in Atlanta, then they appear in Pittsburgh, and then they appear in New York, and they're all the same material. They they have a 1 hour act, and they just repeat the 1 hour act over and over and over. So I thought, man, I guess I'm going to have to build up enough material until I can, do a new set for a new audience all the time. Nowadays, that pressure from Utah, from working in that limited environment where you had the same audience over and over, and if they heard your joke 2 weeks ago, they're not going to laugh at it now. They remember your joke. Even if you have good material, you have to have fresh material. That small environment, pressure cooker, tiny environment of Salt Lake City, produced a lot of material for me. And then I get back here to Connecticut, and I've got a different environment. Here's one thing that's different. In Utah, you had to be clean, right? You could be edgy, you could be a little bit, you could even say some bad words, but generally you had to keep it pretty clean and pretty calm. They would cut your mic, they would flash the light to get you off the stage, they would come up and take the mic out of your hand if you got dirty. So you had to stay generally kind of clean, even though it's 21 and older and people are drinking alcohol. The owners were Mormons, or half the patrons were Mormons, and people wanted to come out and enjoy themselves and have a comedy show and not listen to a bunch of sex and swearing and stuff. That was just Utah. Here in Connecticut, all bets are off. If it's a comedy show, all bets are off. They're against politically incorrect stuff here in Connecticut more. But other than that, all bets are off. So I learned you got to be fresh and have new jokes. And I found very quickly that jokes, now this is probably, I don't know how I should set this aside inside this talk. Attention, ladies and gentlemen, this is a main and important point that I'm about to give. The jokes had to be at my expense as the person telling the joke. I did tell jokes that were about some third person, and they just didn't work. Or I would tell jokes about myself being smart and some other idiot doing something, and that didn't work. And I would tell jokes where I understood something, but the audience had to be clued in to it. And as the audience gets clued in, they realize that they didn't understand what was going on and that I understood. And those jokes just don't work. The only jokes that work are the jokes where I'm the fool, and the audience gets to laugh at me being the fool. Now, why that's the case, I think that might be down to our culture. Because I've tested this. I've gone on YouTube and I looked up science jokes. And I watched these jokes that are brilliant, like a noble gas walks into a bar. Bartender says, "We don't serve your kind here, buddy." The noble gas doesn't react. Right? I think that's hilarious. But there are people who are going to watch that joke, and they're going to think, that's not funny, you're Mr. Smarty Pants, and you got out of college, and now you know about noble gases, boo-hoo on you. And there is really that sort of attitude in our society. I've actually made a little teeny Venn diagram of if you can make jokes about what you despise properly. Charles too goes over this in his video. You shouldn't make jokes about things that are serious to you. It would be in bad taste to make a joke about September 11th attacks or about the Holocaust. Now, there are jokes about the Holocaust, but they're in poor taste. They're not, a person's not proud of them, and they're said in a whisper like, "Can you believe how bad this joke is? I can't believe that. That's terrible. Why would you tell that joke?" That's how those jokes are told. So you tell jokes about things you despise, and you tell jokes to belittle things. So, I have done this Venn diagram. These are jokes I despise, and these are things that the left despise. And there's this teeny sliver in between where I despise certain things and the left despises certain things. And it's that teeny sliver of intersection where we both despise those things, and those are the things that I can make fun of in comedy clubs in Connecticut. It's a pretty small amount of things. A guy from Russia once said that in Soviet Russia they had a political czar, they had the jokes department. You had to get your jokes approved. And he said all jokes were offensive except for jokes about fruit and animals. And he said there was only comedy about fruit and animals. Now, we can make some jokes about animals. A horse walks into a bar and the bartender says, "Why the long face, buddy?" Right? That joke would go in Soviet Russia. You could do a whole act of what's a fruit that's faithful. Well, it would wear a chastity belt. The cantaloupe, right? And if that's the sort of material you're going on, if that's comedy, and you're making fun of and belittling fruit, you're making fun of and belittling animals. No, you're not making fun of and belittling anything. That's not real comedy. You're not really biting at anything, and that's censorship. That's what happens under censorship. So in my view, the left poisons comedy today because they want to belittle Trump. I can stand up there and do jokes about Trump, and they like that. But they don't want to hear the belittling of socialism or Obama or the transgender issue or something like that. You can't make too much fun of that or you'll get booed off the stage. Or Black Lives Matter, you have to be in favor of that. But I just live in a socialist network where the left poisons everything. And that's a terrible thing around my situation. But interestingly, I've found that I have to be the butt of the joke in some way. I can build the joke, I can take a joke that works in my mind and build it so that me, as I tell it to the audience, I'm the butt of the joke, and then the joke can work. I do think that that is down to our culture today. I think so. Because I just don't have that feeling when I go watch science videos with jokes. Some of these jokes go over my head. That's right, I was going to say this earlier and didn't get to it. And I watch these videos and I don't know exactly what the XY coordinate thing is. I don't know those higher bits of math that well. And so they tell some joke about the XY coordinate. It goes over my head. But I don't despise the guy and I don't hold it against him for knowing more than me about math. So I think it's a crappy culture we live in that is poisoning comedy. And I don't know exactly what sort of comedy I would or could write if I weren't under this restriction. But the comedy that I do write runs a fine line of making fun of the things that we can all safely laugh at. I do have one joke about Trump and Putin and Vicente Fox going camping together. And Vicente Fox says, "Tequila ruined my country," throws his tequila up and shoots at it. Putin says, "Vodka ruined my country," throws his vodka and shoots at it. And Putin gets up and throws Trump gets up and throws his whiskey in the air, and then he shoots Vicente Fox. Now, I use that because everyone wants to laugh at Trump. It says that the Mexicans are ruining America, but it says that Trump says the Mexicans are ruining America. And we're laughing at Trump, right? So that's a joke that I can tell, which is a little edgy and yet safe for the liberals to laugh at. And I have to handle, the liberals have to be handled with kitten gloves today in comedy. And it's sad and pathetic, but that's how it is. So, I'm not sure if I have very much more to say on this subject. The left poisons everything, including comedy. In the Soviet times, in Soviet Russia, they had only fruit and animals you can make fun of, and that's where the left is going. If you've seen some social justice warrior comedy shows, where it's like no irony and it's safe humor for everybody, there's this gay 22-year-old with a cat hat dancing around going, "I'm a kitty cat, meow, meow, I'm a kitty cat." And that is what they call comedy. So if you can't handle edgy stuff that belittles the things around you that need to be laughed at, then you're going to be sans comedy. That's where we're heading if the left keeps going where they're going.